create this fantasy architecture, kind of an early vision of what you think of as Disney World. You go to Disney World and you go to a fake Main Street and you go to a fake future world. But it's very compelling and very interesting, and that's what movie palaces were like in the 1920s. They were a fantasy architecture that you could come escape into. In fact, William Fox, who was one of the great entrepreneurs of motion pictures, said that he wasn't so much selling tickets to movies as he was selling tickets to movie theaters. So when you came in here, you got to see this grand, elegant architecture at a very reasonable price. I mean, motion pictures even today are reasonably priced compared to what a rock or a symphony concert ticket is. And you get to sit in this grand movie palace space with gold leaf and fancy arches and decorative carvings all over the place. And it still works today to create this grand, elegant feeling, and it was a wonderful way for motion pictures to be moved from the kind of lowbrow Nickelodeon environment that they were first exhibited in. Someone would set up a storefront and put up a sheet and show a bunch of short movies that were really aimed at working class type individuals, and they were popular there, but the middle class and found movies to be a little scary and salacious, so they weren't going to movies as much as the early movie entrepreneurs wanted them to. So they said, you know, if we put the movies in a grand piece of architecture, then the middle class, well, I think will be less afraid of going into the movies, and it worked very, very well. So this marriage of movie architecture and movies created this wonderful experience that we've now know as going out to the motion picture. Well, over the years, the grand quality of the movie theater has been diminished, and a modern movie theater focuses all of its architectural interest in the foyer areas, in the lobby areas, because that's where they sell the concessions. And in a movie palace in the 1920s, they didn't sell concessions, or at least they didn't sell very many of them. They focused on the grandeur of the architecture and the entertainment of the movie and vaudeville show that you came to see. So we're in the grand foyer of the Michigan Theater, which is the most architecturally unique part of the Michigan Theater. The Michigan Theater was built on the scale of a neighborhood movie palace. The big city movie palaces like the Fox Theater in Detroit or Radio City Music Hall in New York City had several lobbies, and they had a small hospital and a nursery and all kinds of things in them. But neighborhood movie palaces like the Michigan didn't have those kind of amenities. They usually had a small lobby, and we have a small lobby right off of the street, but those small lobbies went right into the theater. And the fact that we have this grand foyer is a tip to the hat that when the Michigan Theater opened in 1928, it was designed to be the grand cultural showplace of Ann Arbor. It was dedicated to the citizens of Ann Arbor and to the University of Michigan as a cultural center for movies and live shows. It had grand aspirations. The architect of the Michigan Theater was a guy by the name of Maurice Finkel, who was actually a Detroit architect, and for many years he and his wife Anya lived in Ann Arbor. And so there's a very nice local connection to the architect of the Michigan Theater, which is unusual because most movie palaces were designed by national firms that were not located in the region or in the community. Well, this grand foyer has a vaulted ceiling with coffers in it that are very reminiscent of the grand opera houses, particularly the Vienna Staatsoper. There's also mirrored insets into some of the architectural elements, which again is very reminiscent of the Vienna Staatsoper. And then the plaster decorations and medallions around are also a tip of the hat to the 18th century opera houses that the movie palace architecture imitated. And you add chandeliers and all kinds of other amenities like that, and you end up with a grand space that, again, encouraged the middle class and the upper classes to think of movies as a safe and entertaining type of amusement and cultural amenity that they could safely take their friends and family to and enjoy. So I think those same kind of architectural elements and those local connections work even today at the Michigan Theater as the community has embraced this place. They celebrate the art and architecture of the space, and they celebrate the art that plays out on our screen and on our stage every day of the week. Well, the Michigan Theater has benefited from many wonderful volunteer leaders, and the plaque that you see here that's a tribute to Ambassador Ron Weiser and Eileen Weiser. Ron and Eileen led our second major capital campaign that allowed us to finish the physical restoration of the historic theater and the grand foyer and facade. The first phase of that restoration was led by Judy Dell Rummelhart and her late husband, Bob Alexander. So without those kind of folks, we just couldn't operate the Michigan Theater, and we're very grateful to Ambassador Weiser and Eileen Weiser and Judy Rummelhart for her wonderful leadership at a very crucial time in the Michigan Theater's history. And right below the plaque is a drinking fountain from the 1920s, and this is a brass drinking fountain that we understand is exactly the same kind of drinking fountain that was used in the Roxy Theater in New York. Now, the Roxy Theater was, at the time, in the early 1920s, the grandest and largest movie palace in the United States. And it was called the Roxy after its manager, and his name was Samuel Rothafeld, or Roxy Rothafeld. And he not only ran the Roxy Theater,